The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of courtroom 7B in the federal courthouse. Vikram Patel sat at the defendant's table, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He wore his best Navy suit, the one he saved for important interviews and court appearances. Today was definitely a day that called for his best. At 43, Patel had spent nearly 20 years as an investigative journalist. His stories had exposed corrupt politicians, dishonest business leaders, and government cover-ups. His work had won awards and made enemies. But today was different. Today, he faced Judge Elizabeth Barrett, one of the most respected federal judges in Washington. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, notebooks and pens ready. They knew this was big. One of their own was being asked to reveal sources for a story that had rocked the Capitol. Patel's article, published just 2 weeks ago in the Washington Chronicle, claimed that federal judges were being pressured to rule certain ways in cases involving powerful people. His story named names and included details that could only have come from someone high up in the system. The article hit Washington like a bomb. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Barrett entered the courtroom. She was a tall woman in her late 50s with short gray hair and glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. Judge Barrett had a reputation for fairness and toughness. Lawyers who came to her courtroom unprepared often left feeling like schoolchildren who had failed a test. "Be seated," she said, her voice clear and commanding. She settled into her chair and looked directly at Patel. "We're here today on the matter of the United States versus Vikram Patel. Mr. Patel has published certain claims about judicial conduct and has refused to comply with a subpoena to reveal his sources." Patel felt his heart beating faster. Next to him, his lawyer, Carol Bennett, placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Carol was one of the best First Amendment lawyers in the country. Her short red hair and freckles made her look younger than her 50 years, but her reputation was solid. "Your Honor," Carol said, standing up, "my client is exercising his First Amendment rights as a journalist to protect his sources. The freedom of the press." Judge Barrett raised her hand. "Ms. Bennett, I am well aware of the First Amendment. I am also aware that there are limits when national security may be involved. Mr. Patel's article makes serious claims about judicial interference in the Monroe case, a matter that involves classified information." The Monroe case. Everyone in Washington knew about it. Senator Joseph Monroe had been accused of selling influence to foreign businesses. The case had been making its way through the courts for almost a year, with surprising rulings that many found hard to understand. Judge Barrett looked directly at Patel. "Mr. Patel, this court orders you to reveal the sources for your allegations. Your article suggests that judges have been improperly influenced. These are serious claims that undermine public trust in our legal system." Carol started to speak, but Patel touched her arm and stood up himself. He was tall and thin, with dark hair that was just starting to show gray at the temples. His brown eyes met Judge Barrett's blue ones without flinching. "Your Honor, I respectfully decline," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "The First Amendment protects journalists from being forced to reveal their sources. This protection is essential for a free press to function as a check on power." Judge Barrett frowned. "The First Amendment is not absolute when national security is concerned, Mr. Patel. You've alleged that classified information was improperly handled. This court needs to know your sources to determine if national secrets have been compromised." "My sources did not compromise national security, Your Honor," Patel replied. "They exposed misconduct that the public has a right to know about." The judge leaned forward. "That's not for you to decide, Mr. Patel. This court has the authority to compel you to reveal your sources in this instance. I am ordering you to do so now." The courtroom was completely silent. Everyone watched Patel, waiting for his response. Carol looked worried. She knew what was at stake. If Patel refused a direct order, he could be held in contempt of court. That meant jail time. Patel took a deep breath. This moment was exactly what he had prepared for since the story broke. He reached down to his briefcase, opened it, and took out a manila folder. The folder was marked with red tape along the edge, the kind used for recently declassified government documents. "Your Honor," he said, his voice now stronger, "I do have a source I can reveal. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Barrett looked surprised. She hadn't expected him to give in so easily. "Approach the bench, Mr. Patel," she said. Patel walked forward, the folder in his hand. Carol came with him, as did the government lawyer, a serious man named Greg Peters who worked for the Department of Justice. When they stood before the judge, Patel opened the folder and took out several pages of documents. "My source, Your Honor, is this declassified memorandum from the Department of Justice. You'll find your signature on page 3, paragraph 2. Judge Barrett took the papers, her expression giving nothing away. She put on her glasses and began to read. As she turned to the 3rd page, her face changed. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hand, holding the document, trembled slightly. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice now much quieter. "It was provided to me by a source within the Department of Justice," Patel replied. "As you can see, it has been officially declassified. I am not revealing any classified information by sharing it." The document was a memo about the Monroe case. It outlined how certain evidence should be handled, or rather, not handled. And there, at the bottom of page 3, was a clear instruction to keep specific financial records from being entered into evidence. Next to this instruction was Judge Barrett's signature. Greg Peters leaned forward to look at the document. His eyes widened. "Your Honor, the government needs time to verify the authenticity of this document." Judge Barrett was still staring at the signature. It looked like hers. The initials EB were written in the same way she always wrote them, but she had no memory of ever signing such a document. "This is not possible," she said quietly. Then she seemed to remember where she was and straightened up. "The court will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Mr. Peters, I expect the Department of Justice to verify whether this document is authentic by that time." She looked at Patel, her eyes now cold. "Mr. Patel, you are not to publish anything about this document until this court determines its authenticity. Is that clear?" Patel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Court is adjourned," Judge Barrett announced, then quickly left the bench. As Patel returned to his seat, the courtroom erupted in whispers. Carol looked at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. "That was quite a bombshell," she said. "I hope you know what you're doing." Patel watched as Judge Barrett disappeared through the door behind the bench. "The truth always comes out, eventually," he said. "Sometimes it just needs a little help." Outside the courtroom, reporters surrounded Patel, shouting questions. He held up his hands. "No comments today, folks. The judge has ordered me not to discuss the case." As he pushed through the crowd, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "Be careful. They will come after you now. I have more documents. Meet me tonight." Patel deleted the message and kept walking. The real story, he knew, was just beginning. Susan Miller yawned as she glanced at the clock on her office wall. It was almost 9:30 p.m., and she was the last person left in the records department at the Department of Justice. At 52, with 20 years of service behind her, Susan was used to long hours. As a senior records clerk, she took pride in her work and the trust placed in her to handle sensitive documents. The stack of files on her desk had seemed endless when she started at 8 a.m. Now finally she was down to the last folder. She rubbed her tired eyes and opened it. Inside was a memo related to the Monroe corruption case that had been in the news for months. Senator Joseph Monroe was accused of taking bribes from foreign businesses in exchange for helping them get government contracts. Susan started scanning the document into the system, a routine task she had done thousands of times before. The memo detailed instructions for handling evidence in the Monroe case. As she flipped to the 3rd page, something caught her eye. There was a handwritten note in the margin requesting that certain financial records be handled with special protocols and not entered into evidence. The note was initialed EB. Susan paused. Those initials looked familiar. She had processed many court documents over the years, and she recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Judge Elizabeth Barrett. who had presided over several cases related to the Monroe investigation. This was strange. Why would a federal judge be giving instructions about evidence before it reached her courtroom? Judges were supposed to be impartial and only rule on evidence presented during trial. They weren't supposed to decide what evidence could be shown beforehand. Susan felt her stomach tighten. This didn't seem right. She finished scanning the document but made a personal copy before placing the original back in its folder. She wasn't sure what to do, but she knew this information was important. The next morning, Susan called her old college friend, Alan Garcia. They had been close at Georgetown University 30 years ago and had stayed in touch over the years. Alan was now a senior editor at the Washington Chronicle. "Alan, I need your advice," Susan said when they met for coffee at a small shop 3 blocks from her office. "I found something at work that doesn't seem right, but I'm not sure what to do about it." Alan listened carefully as Susan explained what she had discovered, without showing him the document. He had salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind his glasses. After 30 years in journalism, he had developed a good sense for important stories. "This sounds serious, Susan," he said when she finished. "If a federal judge is interfering with evidence, that's a major breach of judicial ethics, possibly even criminal." Susan nodded. "I know. That's why I'm so troubled. I've always followed the rules, Alan. In 20 years, I've never taken a document, home or shared confidential information. But this feels different. This feels wrong." Alan thought for a moment. "I know someone who might be able to help. He's one of our best investigative reporters. His name is Vikram Patel, and he specializes in government corruption stories. Would you be willing to talk to him?" Susan hesitated. "I could lose my job, Alan. I could even go to jail." "There are laws to protect whistleblowers," Alan assured her. "And Vikram is very careful with his sources. He would never reveal your identity." After another day of thinking it over, Susan agreed to meet with Vikram Patel. They met at her small apartment in Alexandria, Virginia. Susan lived alone with her 2 cats, surrounded by books and plants. She had never married, devoting her life instead to her work at the Department of Justice. She believed in the system and in the importance of doing things the right way. Vikram was younger than she expected, but his eyes showed intelligence and determination. He listened without interrupting as Susan explained what she had found. "Can I see the document?" he asked when she finished. Susan handed him the copy she had made. Vikram studied it carefully, especially the handwritten note with the initials, EB. "This is very serious," he said. "If Judge Barrett is directing which evidence can be presented in a case she's presiding over, that's a clear violation of judicial ethics and possibly federal law." "I know," Susan said. "That's why I felt I had to do something. The system only works if everyone follows the rules, especially judges." "Why do you think she would do this?" Vikram asked. Susan shook her head. "I don't know. Judge Barrett has always had a good reputation. She's known for being fair and honest. This doesn't make sense to me." Vikram thought for a moment. "Have there been any unusual rulings in the Monroe case?" "Yes," Susan replied. "Several key pieces of evidence have been excluded for various technical reasons. People in the office have been surprised by some of her rulings." Over the next few weeks, Vikram investigated the story thoroughly. He checked court records, interviewed lawyers who had appeared before Judge Barrett, and researched her background. He found that before becoming a judge, she had worked briefly at a law firm that had represented companies owned by Senator Monroe's family. He also discovered that the memo Susan had found wasn't the only document with questionable instructions. There were at least 3 other instances where evidence in the Monroe case had been handled in unusual ways. Vikram wrote his article carefully, making sure to include all the facts he had verified. He did not name Susan as his source, referring only to a source within the Department of Justice with direct access to official documents. The day before the article was published, Vikram called Susan. "The story runs tomorrow," he told her. "Are you sure you want to go forward with this? Once it's published, there's no going back." Susan took a deep breath. "Yes," she said. "The public has a right to know. If our judges aren't following the law, then the whole system is at risk." The article appeared on the front page of the Washington Chronicle with the headline, "Federal Judge Accused of Manipulating Evidence in High-Profile Corruption Case." It didn't name Judge Barrett directly, but it included enough details that anyone familiar with the Monroe case would know who it was talking about. The reaction was immediate and intense. News channels ran the story all day. The Department of Justice announced an investigation. Senator Monroe's lawyers filed motions for a mistrial, and Judge Barrett issued a statement denying any wrongdoing and demanding to know the source of the allegations. 3 days after the article was published, Vikram received a subpoena ordering him to appear in Judge Barrett's courtroom and reveal his sources. The judge claimed that the allegations were false and damaging to the judicial system, and that Vikram had possibly published classified information. Susan watched the news with growing anxiety. She had known there would be consequences, but she hadn't expected things to move so quickly. When she arrived at work the morning after Vikram received his subpoena, her boss called her into his office. "Susan," he said, his face serious, "the FBI will be interviewing everyone in the records department today about the leaked memo. Do you know anything about this?" Susan felt her heart racing. "I process hundreds of documents every week," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't remember any specific memo about the Monroe case." Her boss looked at her for a long moment. "They'll be checking the access logs to see who handled the document before it was leaked. Just tell them the truth, Susan." As she left his office, Susan's phone buzzed with a text message from Vikram. "We need to talk. They've ordered me to court tomorrow. I won't reveal you as my source, but they're checking the logs. Meet me tonight at 7. Susan deleted the message and went back to her desk, her hands shaking slightly. For the first time, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The day after the courtroom confrontation, Vikram Patel woke up to find his face on every morning news show. His phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from reporters wanting comments about his showdown with Judge Barrett. He ignored them all. The judge had ordered him not to discuss the case, and he intended to follow that order. Instead, he focused on the mysterious text message he had received after leaving court. He needed to meet this person who claimed to have more documents. It could be a trap, but it could also be the key to understanding what was really happening with Judge Barrett and the Monroe case. The message had instructed him to come to a small coffee shop in Georgetown at 8 p.m. Vikram arrived 30 minutes early and chose a table in the corner where he could see everyone who entered. He ordered a black coffee and waited. At exactly 8 p.m., a young woman with short brown hair walked in. She looked around nervously before approaching his table. "Mr. Patel?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he replied. "And you are?" "My name is Laura Jenkins. I work as an assistant to Greg Peters at the Department of Justice." Vikram recognized the name. Greg Peters was the government lawyer who had been in court yesterday, the one who had seemed surprised by the document with Judge Barrett's signature. "Please, sit down," Vikram said. "You said you have more documents?" Laura nodded, glancing around to make sure no one was watching them. "Mr. Peters has been working late every night since your article was published. He's worried about something. Last night I stayed late to finish some work and saw him shredding papers. He didn't know I was still there." "Did you see what the papers were?" Vikram asked. "No, but after he left, I checked his computer. He forgot to log out." Laura pulled a small flash drive from her pocket and slid it across the table. "I copied some files I found. There are emails between Mr. Peters and someone named Howard Jenkins from Senator Monroe's office. They discuss how to handle the case, including which judge should be assigned to it." Vikram picked up the flash drive. "This could be very important evidence. But Laura, you should know that by giving this to me, you're putting yourself at risk." "I know," she said. "But something wrong is happening. The justice system is supposed to be fair. If people are manipulating cases to protect powerful senators, the public should know." After Laura left, Vikram went straight to Carol Bennett's house. His lawyer needed to see this new evidence. Carol lived in a small townhouse in Alexandria. When she opened the door, Vikram could see she had been working. Papers were spread across her dining room table, and her reading glasses were perched on top of her head. "We need to talk," Vikram said. Inside, he showed her the flash drive and explained his meeting with Laura. Carol plugged the drive into her laptop and began reading the files. "This is big, Vikram," she said after a few minutes. "These emails suggest that Greg Peters and Howard Jenkins worked together to make sure Judge Barrett was assigned to the Monroe case. And look at this one. It mentions something called Operation Clean Slate." "What's that?" Vikram asked, looking over her shoulder. "I don't know, but they mention it several times. It seems to be some kind of plan related to the Monroe case." The next morning, Vikram and Carol returned to court. Judge Barrett looked tired with dark circles under her eyes. Greg Peters was already there, talking quietly with 2 FBI agents. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Barrett took her seat. "Be seated," she said. "Mr. Peters, what has the Department of Justice determined about the document Mr. Patel presented yesterday?" Greg Peters stood up. "Your Honor, the document appears to be authentic. It was in our system. However, we believe it may have been altered before it was leaked to Mr. Patel." "Altered how?" Judge Barrett asked. "The handwritten note and initials on page 3 do not appear in our original copy. We believe someone added them to make it appear that Your Honor was improperly influencing the case." Judge Barrett nodded. "That would explain it. I have never written such instructions, and I would never interfere with evidence in a case before my court." Vikram leaned over to Carol and whispered, "He's lying. The document I have is the real one." Carol stood up. "Your Honor, we dispute Mr. Peters' claim. We have reason to believe the document Mr. Patel obtained is the authentic version, and that the Department of Justice may have altered their copy to remove the handwritten notes." "That's a serious accusation, Ms. Bennett," Judge Barrett said. "Do you have evidence to support it?" "We do, Your Honor. We have information suggesting that Mr. Peters has been working with Howard Jenkins, an aide to Senator Monroe, to manipulate this case. We believe they specifically arranged for this case to be assigned to Your Honor." Greg Peters jumped to his feet. "That's completely false. Your Honor, Ms. Bennett is making wild accusations without any proof." Judge Barrett looked troubled. "Ms. Bennett, I need to see this evidence immediately. Mr. Peters, I want an explanation for how my name could have appeared on that document if I didn't write it." As the lawyers argued, FBI agent Kevin Williams sat in the back of the courtroom watching carefully. Williams had been assigned to investigate the leaked memo. He was a serious man with 20 years of experience investigating public corruption cases. He had short gray hair and always wore a plain dark suit. Williams had spent the last 2 days interviewing everyone at the Department of Justice who might have had access to the memo. Yesterday, he had interviewed Susan Miller, and something about her story didn't add up. She claimed not to remember the memo, but the access logs showed she had been the last person to handle it before the leak. After court adjourned for the day, Williams approached Vikram as he was leaving the courthouse. "Mr. Patel, I'm Agent Williams with the FBI. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your source." "I'm not revealing my source, Agent Williams," Vikram replied. "I understand that. But I'm not asking who your source is. I'm asking if you trust them completely." Vikram was surprised by the question. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because something doesn't add up in this case. The document you have shows Judge Barrett's handwriting, but we've compared it to other samples of her writing. And there are slight differences. Very slight, but they're there." "What are you suggesting?" Vikram asked. "I'm not suggesting anything yet. I'm still gathering facts. But you should be careful. Not everyone in this case is who they appear to be." That night, Vikram couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Agent Williams had said. Could Susan Miller have lied to him? Could the handwriting on the memo be forged? If so, who would want to frame Judge Barrett and why? He decided to go back to the beginning. He called Alan Garcia, the editor who had first connected him with Susan. "Alan, I need to know more about Susan Miller. How long have you known her?" "Since college, about 30 years. Why? Is she in trouble?" "Maybe." "The FBI is investigating the leak. They've figured out she was the last person to handle the document before it was leaked." Alan was quiet for a moment. "Vikram, there's something you should know about Susan. Before she worked at the Department of Justice, she was engaged to a man named Jack Barrett." "Barrett?" Like Judge Barrett? Elizabeth Barrett's brother. They were supposed to get married, but he called it off a week before the wedding. Susan was devastated. She never really got over it. Vikram felt a chill run down his spine. Did you know this when you connected us? No, I swear. I knew she had been engaged once, but I didn't know to whom. I only remembered when I saw Judge Barrett's name in your article. After hanging up, Vikram immediately called Carol. We have a problem, he said. I think we've been set up. The Lincoln Memorial stood quiet in the early morning light. At 6 a.m., the usual crowds of tourists were absent. Vikram Patel sat on the cold marble steps, waiting. After his discovery about Susan Miller's connection to Judge Barrett's family, he had spent a sleepless night trying to understand what was really happening. Was Susan using him to get revenge on Judge Barrett? Had she forged the handwritten note on the memo? If so, what about the other evidence, like the emails Laura Jenkins had given him? Nothing made sense anymore. A tall man with white hair walked slowly up the steps and sat down beside Vikram. He wore a plain gray coat and carried a small briefcase. Mr. Patel, the man said quietly. My name is Frank Collins. I worked at the Department of Justice for 35 years before retiring last year. I was the Deputy Director of Document Security. How did you get my number? Vikram asked. I still have friends in the department. I heard about your court case and what happened with that memo. Frank looked around to make sure no one was nearby. Something similar happened to me last year. I found a document that had been altered, and when I reported it, I was forced to retire. What kind of document? Vikram asked. It was related to the Monroe investigation. Someone was changing official records to protect certain people. Frank opened his briefcase and took out a folder. These are copies of what I found. I've been collecting evidence for months, waiting for the right time to come forward. Vikram took the folder and looked through the papers inside. There were copies of emails, memos, and handwritten notes. Some were from Greg Peters. Others were from Howard Jenkins. They outlined something called Operation Clean Slate. What is this? Vikram asked. A plan to erase evidence in the Monroe case, Frank explained. Senator Monroe has powerful friends who don't want him to go to prison. They've been working for over a year to make sure that doesn't happen. And Judge Barrett, is she part of this? Frank shook his head. No, she's one of the few honest judges they couldn't control. That's why they needed to remove her from the case. By framing her? Vikram asked. Yes, by making it look like she was interfering with evidence. They knew she would have to step down from the case if there were allegations of misconduct. Vikram thought about Susan Miller. So the person who gave me the memo with Judge Barrett's handwriting on it was working for them, Frank finished, probably without knowing it. These people are very good at manipulating others. Vikram showed Frank the flash drive Laura Jenkins had given him. What about this? It contains emails between Peters and Jenkins discussing how to get Judge Barrett assigned to the case. Frank examined the emails on Vikram's laptop. This is interesting. It seems they originally wanted Barrett on the case because they thought they could control her through someone named Jack. Jack Barrett, Vikram said. The judge's brother. He was engaged to my source, Susan Miller, but he broke it off just before the wedding. Frank nodded. That makes sense. They probably thought they could use Jack to influence his sister, but something must have gone wrong. These later emails show they changed their plan. They decided to remove Judge Barrett instead. By framing her for interfering with evidence, Vikram said, and they used Susan to do it, knowing she had a grudge against the Barrett family. As the sun rose higher, Frank and Vikram continued to piece together the story. Operation Clean Slate was a plan by Senator Monroe's allies to make sure he was never convicted. They had been manipulating evidence, influencing judges, and removing anyone who couldn't be controlled. The question is, what do we do now? Vikram asked. I published a story accusing Judge Barrett of misconduct based on a forged document. I need to correct this. Be careful, Frank warned. These people are dangerous. They've ruined careers and lives to protect themselves. Later that day, Vikram met with Carol Bennett at her office. He showed her everything Frank Collins had given him. This changes everything, Carol said after reading through the documents. We need to go to the FBI with this. I already called Agent Williams, Vikram replied. He's meeting us here in an hour. What about Susan Miller? She used you, Vikram. I'm not sure she knew what she was doing, Vikram said. I think Peters and Jenkins used her just like they used me. They knew about her history with Jack Barrett and took advantage of her feelings. When Agent Williams arrived, he spent 2 hours going through the evidence. His face grew more serious with each page he read. This is big, he said finally. Much bigger than I thought. This isn't just about one case or one judge. This is systematic corruption at the highest levels. Will you investigate it? Carol asked. Yes, but we need to be smart about this. Some of the people mentioned in these documents have powerful friends. We can't just rush in with accusations. What about my story? Vikram asked. I need to publish a correction. Not yet, Williams said. If you publish now, they'll know we're onto them. We need time to gather more evidence. But Judge Barrett's reputation is being destroyed because of my article, Vikram argued. I understand, but we need to look at the bigger picture. If we move too quickly, Peters and Jenkins will destroy evidence, and Senator Monroe will walk free. That night, Vikram couldn't sleep again. He felt terrible about what had happened to Judge Barrett. His story had damaged her reputation, and it was based on a lie. As a journalist, his duty was to the truth. He had to correct his mistake. Against Agent Williams's advice, Vikram began writing a new article. This one would expose Operation Clean Slate and clear Judge Barrett's name. He worked through the night, carefully checking every fact and making sure to protect Frank Collins as his source. In the morning, just as he finished the article, there was a knock at his door. It was Agent Williams, and he wasn't alone. 2 other FBI agents stood with him. Vikram Patel, I need you to come with us, Williams said. His voice was formal, not friendly like before. What's going on? Vikram asked. Frank Collins was found dead in his apartment an hour ago, and we have evidence suggesting you may have been involved. What? That's impossible. Vikram was shocked. I was with him yesterday. He gave me evidence about Operation Clean Slate. Operation what? Williams looked confused. I don't know what you're talking about. We found your fingerprints in his apartment and on the murder weapon. This is crazy. I've never been to his apartment. As the agents led him away in handcuffs, Vikram realized what had happened. Peters and Jenkins had discovered that Frank had talked to him. They had killed Frank and were framing him for the murder, just as they had framed Judge Barrett for interfering with evidence. In the back of the FBI car, Vikram thought about his new article. He had emailed it to Alan Garcia just before the FBI arrived. He hoped Alan would publish it. It was his only chance to expose the truth and clear both his name and Judge Barrett's. But as the car drove toward the FBI office, Vikram saw a news alert on his phone. The headline read, Editor of Washington Chronicle found unconscious in home suspected poisoning. Alan Garcia had been silenced too. The truth about Operation Clean Slate might never come out now. Vikram Patel sat in a small holding cell at the FBI office. He had been there for 6 hours, answering the same questions over and over. How did he know Frank Collins? When had they last met? Why were his fingerprints in Collins's apartment? Vikram told the truth each time, but the agents didn't seem to believe him. I never went to his apartment, Vikram repeated. We met at the Lincoln Memorial yesterday morning. He gave me documents about Operation Clean Slate. I never touched any weapon. Agent Williams watched him from across the table. We found your fingerprints on a knife in Collins' kitchen, the same knife that was used to kill him. That's impossible, Vikram insisted. Someone is framing me, just like they framed Judge Barrett. Williams sighed. Look, Patel, I want to believe you, but the evidence is clear. Your fingerprints are on the murder weapon. We have security camera footage of someone entering Collins' building at 2 a.m. who matches your height and build. It wasn't me. Vikram was desperate now. Check my phone location data. Check my home security system. I was at home all night writing a new article. We're checking those things now, Williams said. In the meantime, you'll stay here. After Williams left, Vikram put his head in his hands. Everything was falling apart. Frank Collins was dead. Alan Garcia was in the hospital, and he was being framed for murder. The people behind Operation Clean Slate were covering their tracks, eliminating anyone who threatened to expose them. Vikram thought about the new article he had written. He had emailed it to Alan, but with Alan in the hospital, it might never be published. The truth about the conspiracy might die with Frank Collins. Then he remembered something. He had also sent the article to Carol Bennett, his lawyer. Carol would know what to do. She would fight for him and for the truth. Meanwhile, in her hospital room, Judge Elizabeth Barrett stared out the window. She had checked herself in the night, before suffering from exhaustion and stress after the courtroom revelation. Her reputation was in tatters. News reports were calling for her resignation. Some were even suggesting criminal charges for interfering with evidence. A nurse entered with a phone. "Judge Barrett, there's a call for you. A woman named Carol Bennett insists it's urgent." Barrett took the phone. "This is Elizabeth Barrett." "Judge Barrett, this is Carol Bennett, Vikram Patel's attorney. I know we're on opposite sides of the courtroom, but I have information you need to hear. Vikram has been arrested for a murder he didn't commit, and I believe you're in danger too." Barrett listened as Carol explained everything. Operation Clean Slate, Frank Collins' evidence, and how both Barrett and Patel had been framed. "I have Vikram's new article," Carol said. "It explains everything and clears your name. But the people behind this conspiracy are dangerous. They've already killed Collins and poisoned Alan Garcia. They might come after you next." "What do you want from me?" Barrett asked. "Protection," Carol replied. "I need to get this article published, but I need help from someone with authority, someone who can provide security while we expose the truth." Judge Barrett thought for a moment. Her entire career had been built on upholding the law and seeking the truth. If what Carol was saying was true, then a massive conspiracy was undermining the justice system she had sworn to protect. "Come to the hospital," she decided. "Bring everything you have. We'll figure out our next steps." An hour later, Carol sat in Barrett's hospital room, showing her all the evidence Frank Collins had provided. The judge read everything carefully, her face growing more serious with each page. "This is worse than I imagined," she said finally. "These people have been manipulating cases for years, not just the Monroe trial." "What can we do?" Carol asked. "Vikram is in FBI custody, and I'm not sure who we can trust there." Barrett picked up her phone. "I still have friends in the Justice Department, people I've known for decades who I know are honest. Let me make some calls." While Barrett made her calls, Carol received a text message from an unknown number. "We have the flash drive from Laura Jenkins. It contains a virus that planted fake emails. Don't trust anything on it." Carol showed the message to Barrett. "What does this mean?" "It means they're trying to discredit the evidence," Barrett explained. "They want us to think the emails between Peters and Jenkins are fake." "But how do we know this message is trustworthy?" Carol asked. "We don't," Barrett admitted. "This is how they operate, creating doubt, turning people against each other." Just then there was a knock at the door. A tall woman in a business suit entered. "Judge Barrett, I'm Director Helen Foster from the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility. You asked for me?" Barrett nodded. "Helen, thank you for coming so quickly. We have evidence of a serious conspiracy involving people in our department." Director Foster listened as Barrett and Carol explained everything. She examined the documents carefully, taking notes. "This is disturbing," she said when they finished. "If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond corruption. This is a threat to our entire justice system." "We need your help," Barrett said. "Vikram Patel is being held by the FBI for a murder he didn't commit, and we need protection to publish his article exposing all of this." Director Foster nodded. "I'll make some calls. We need to move quickly." Within hours, things began to happen. Vikram was released from FBI custody after security footage from his apartment building confirmed he had been home all night when Frank Collins was killed. The fingerprints on the murder weapon were determined to be from a partial print, lifted from a glass Vikram had used at a restaurant and transferred using advanced techniques. Alan Garcia regained consciousness in the hospital and confirmed that Vikram had sent him an article exposing Operation Clean Slate. The article was recovered from Alan's email and published in a special edition of the Washington Chronicle. The article caused an immediate sensation. It detailed how Greg Peters, Howard Jenkins, and others had conspired to protect Senator Monroe by manipulating evidence and framing Judge Barrett. It explained how Susan Miller had been used because of her connection to Jack Barrett, the judge's brother. As the story broke, FBI agents arrested Greg Peters and Howard Jenkins. Documents were seized from their offices and homes, providing even more evidence of the conspiracy. Senator Monroe announced his resignation, claiming health reasons. 3 weeks later, Vikram sat in Judge Barrett's office. She had been fully cleared of any wrongdoing and had returned to the bench. The Justice Department had issued a formal apology for the damage to her reputation. "I wanted to thank you," Barrett said. "Your article saved my career and exposed a dangerous conspiracy." "I also wanted to apologize," Vikram replied. "My first article accused you of misconduct based on a forged document. I should have investigated more carefully." Barrett nodded. "We were both victims in this. They used your desire for the truth against you, just as they used Susan Miller's personal feelings against her. Have you spoken to her?" Vikram asked. "Yes," Barrett said. "She's cooperating with the investigation. She truly believed the document was real. She didn't know she was being used to frame me." Vikram looked out the window at the city below. "What happens now?" "Justice," Barrett replied simply. "Peters and Jenkins will stand trial. So will others involved in the conspiracy. The system isn't perfect, Mr. Patel, but it works when honest people fight for the truth." As Vikram left the courthouse, he saw Laura Jenkins waiting for him. The young assistant who had given him the flash drive looked nervous. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I was working for them too. They told me to give you that flash drive with the fake emails. I didn't know what they were really doing until I read your article." Vikram wasn't surprised. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want to make it right," Laura said. "I have more evidence, real evidence, about other cases they manipulated, other judges they tried to control or remove." Vikram thought for a moment. "Come with me," he said finally. "There are some people you should meet." As they walked together toward Judge Barrett's office, Vikram felt a sense of purpose return. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. There were more truths to uncover, more corruption to expose. That was his job as a journalist, to shine light into dark places no matter the personal cost. The fight for justice would continue, and this time, he wouldn't be fighting alone.